Write what you know. One of the most repeated and probably ignored tenets of writing. But here at Lethal Voice, we don't skip it. Nah, we're going to roll around in it. We're going to wallow in it. We're going to get it all over us. I'm Robert Christopher Smith, and once again, this is the Lethal Voice Podcast. Welcome to Season 1, Turning to Vengeance, where I deliver a deep dive on what it was like to get my first films, Vengeance Turns Volume 1 and Volume 2, to the screen, along with all the behind-the-scenes stories that are almost too wild to believe. We're currently still on our first chapter, putting the cart before the horse. If you're just jumping in, roll back to episodes 1 through 3 when you're done here. You'll hear how I hired actors before the script was finished, scouted locations way too early, and basically I just did everything out of order and backwards, but somehow managed to drag this thing across the finish line and ended up with 2 movies. This episode is about writing what you know, and more than that, writing who you are. When I first came up with the basic story for Vengeance Turns, and when we started working on the screenplay, it felt like the most personal thing I'd ever tried to write, and I think that it still is. I always find myself favoring whatever project is my latest as being the best representative of my abilities with both story and writing for the screen, and how important the story feels to me, or my feelings about whatever is going on in the world. But as far as being personal, Vengeance Turns still seems to be the one that feels truly the most personal, exposing my own feelings about everything from family to genetic inheritance to what has truly made America great in concept and in practice when done right. Anyone watching really close would also understand my feelings on violence and revenge by the end of Vengeance Turns Volume 2 as well. By the way, let me say that all through this episode, as I talk about how I do things or how we did things while writing Vengeance Turns, I'm not saying you have to do these same things. I'm really just sharing what works for me, what worked for us, while we were putting this thing together. But let me tell you, the character of Rebecca, who becomes Mia, spoiler alert, is very much a lot of Amanda and a lot of me, all wrapped up in some Old West wardrobe. Now, it was my idea to have the lead character be a female in a Western long before I ever met Amanda, and even before I had a clue it would be called Vengeance Turns. While I am a middle-aged, straight white guy, I am and always have been far from what anyone would call typical in how I express myself, which has led to more than one bit of difficulty in my life, especially as a teenager and a younger man, especially growing up in small town Kentucky. But all of that and so much more ended up channeled directly into the aspects of Rebecca and Mia that I was responsible for. Very specifically, I discovered as a preteen that we had Native American blood on both sides of our family tree, my mom's and my dad's. For me, this was earth-shattering and as exciting news as I could ever imagine. And when I asked for more information, I was shut down immediately, being told that neither of my parents knew, nor did they really care at all about this aspect of our heritage. "We're white, and that's all you need to worry about," was all I would hear. Now, like many Americans, I really take great pride in the mutt type heritage I have, being a mix of a lot of other cultures and ethnicities, but where a lot of my friends know that they are mostly this or mostly that. I never got that in my family, just that we were Americans. And this blind acceptance and willful ignorance of our own past and our ancestry was maddening to me. Years later, as a college student, our whole family was together down in Atlanta, Georgia for Christmas. And on the very first night, my grandfather, my mom's dad, grabbed me and he said he had something to show me. He took me into the spare bedroom where I was going to be staying later, and he pointed at two big, like, cameo type portraits, these old style photographs. One was a man in a dark Union soldier's coat, the saber and everything. And next to him, a small Native American woman. That Union soldier, my great-great-grandfather, he saved this woman. He saved her during the Trail of Tears, one of the most shameful times in American history. He married her. That's my blood. That's where my blood comes from. And when I saw that, I felt it. That connection. But back in the car, driving home to Kentucky, I tried again to get my parents to talk, and they just shut it down again, saying, "There's nothing more you need to know." All of that nearly led to me living on a reservation for a while, right after college, just to find out for myself. But it never happened. Even the mention of this idea set off great waves of panic through my whole family. And in those early days of the internet, it would not be very easy to do the research that I needed to do and I could do today in order to find my way. So instead, I started the Wild Love Rebellion, my band, trying to build my own little tribe, never letting go of my mixed heritage and how important it was in making me exactly who I was and making America who it was and who it is. But I never shook those missing roots. And when Vengeance Turns started taking shape, everything came roaring back through Rebecca, through Mia. See, she's part Kumeyaay. She's part what we called lost people, because she's like me, a mutt who made her own tribe when her old one got buried. If you watch Vengeance Turns Volume 1, which is streaming free on Tubi right now, go check it out. But anyway, if you watch it, you'll notice in a couple of the opening sequences, like with Rebecca and the biddies at the general store, and then at home right after with Michael, her husband, these are full of dialogue that has me expressing my own feelings. For example, as her husband, Michael, is trying to soothe and comfort her, Rebecca cries that her father raised her, quote, white as the whitest cloud. And no matter how cheesy you might think that line is, it means a lot to me. And it's, in a lot of ways, my encapsulation of my whole struggle to learn about my own native heritage while I was growing up and being told not to worry about it. You see, I'm that nerd that you'll see who always has a pen in his pocket. I'm the guy scribbling on bar napkins, the back of receipts, my own arm if I have to. Before Vengeance Turns, there was a project called The End of Fun. And that script basically was born from about 500 scraps of paper, receipts, envelopes, and quite a few napkins from a bar called the Carriage House, where I'd write, drink, and sometimes jump up to sing karaoke, just like my character did in the film. But The End of Fun is a whole other disaster story for a whole other day if you ever want to hear it. My point is, I always have something to write with and something to write on nearby. I keep a notebook and pen beside my bed while I sleep, and cannot tell you the amount of times I've woken in the middle of the night with an idea and just scribbled it down as fast as I could. Admittedly, some of those ideas are garbage, and some of them may have been brilliant, but are completely illegible because, I scribbled it scrambling out of sleep in the dark. But there have been a few ideas, a few twists, a few problems that needed working out that very much came to me in my sleep, though. And I swear by this method that I began in college. It's one of the many pieces of advice that I give to anyone who seems serious and wants to get started writing. Number one, I have no idea what will work for you. And number two, you probably won't want to do this either way, but here's my advice. Always have something to write with and something to write on. Or be prepared to write on money or yourself if necessary. Nothing is so precious that it is safe from sacrifice to the great idea in my world. This is just part of my method in general, and was what I did as I researched native tribes living in Southern California, and specifically on the Kumeyaay themselves for Vengeance Turns. Or even in another whole area of research work that was done by closely watching a long list of movies and one TV series that I wanted to get down deep inside of me as I shaped our own story. I watched stuff like all of the Death Wish films with Charles Bronson and the new one with Bruce Willis from director Eli Roth. I watched all of the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns like The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly at least 2 or 3 times each. I watched stuff like The Last House on the Left, Home Invasions, And I watched the whole Deadwood series on HBO straight through, twice. Sometimes even like rewatching certain parts repeatedly, pausing and scribbling notes. Whenever I'm asked about my writing process, the first thing I always stress is how much reading I do in general. And then the very first thing I do on really any project, no matter whether comics, film, or anything else, is doing that research. It always starts with research for me. That's just who I am, who I've always been. So many of my first stories were written or dreamt up while in elementary, junior high, and high school, college, as I would be listening to an instructor and suddenly my mind would just catch some certain point and spin off into what if. It didn't matter the class either, math, science, history, English, but it was something that I noticed about myself, and I learned to hone this as a skill. When I am really serious about digging in and writing about something, my first instinct is literally to just bury myself in knowledge on the topic. In my younger days, that meant hours spent at the library and even bookstores tracking down various resources. These days, it's a much quicker, more thorough, and more intense drowning, as I can switch between videos, podcasts, and then documented sources to verify and even explore deeper. I just keep cramming it in and cramming it in until it has no choice but to come flooding back out. Another part of me has always been addicted to subversion. I didn't want Vengeance Turns to be just another Western. I didn't see a point in that. It had to be something where we flipped the whole thing on its head. I made it a female lead. I wrapped my own questions about genetics, family, tribes, patriotism, and my rage about how language gets hijacked and twisted. All of it inside one bloody revenge story. I've been pissed for decades that our language has been hijacked by fringe political elements, and with Vengeance Turns, I really feel like I started to hijack it right back. I hope you watch it so you can see what I mean. Feel free to talk to me in the comments. So when we built this world, I buried real research deep inside it. I read about the Kumeyaay, their lands, their history. I didn't want to misrepresent or misappropriate. I invented something that we called the Lost People instead. A new tribe for people like Mia, for people like Amanda and me. Mutts, outcasts, the left behinds. My characters, Delicate Poison and Ghost with Silent Knives Protects, these characters in the film, they started that tribe. They're half Kumeyaay, and their other half is from India, actually from what is today Pakistan. So they're half Indian, half Indian. It doesn't fit neat. None of this does. Neither do I. Neither does my lethal voice. I brought the nerdy, obsessive need for deep dive research, questions about family and about heritage, along with an unswerving instinct to gut familiar, easily accepted ideas and wear their skins to hide in plain sight of our audience. And then there's Amanda, my co-writer, my counterweight. Amanda grounded things in our writing of Vengeance Turns in many ways. She brought the real cowgirl grit to Rebecca and especially to Mia. Amanda actually grew up riding horses and shooting guns her whole life in Texas and Arizona. She was the daughter of a real female sheriff, the first in the U.S., if I'm remembering that correctly. Amanda became an El Paso police officer herself at a pretty young age. And that power that Rebecca and Mia have in Vengeance Turns, that they have as a female and as a person, that directly draws from Amanda and her life. Amanda remained a police officer until she was injured on the job, occurring as she was pursuing and wrestling a bad guy in El Paso, Texas. This directly inspired our having Rebecca suffer something similar in her transformation into Mia. Whereas Amanda literally had her thumb ripped off in the struggle with the suspect when she was injured and had it reattached, but primarily for cosmetic purposes since she was told it would never work, the same as it had before the injury. We had Rebecca reaching for her husband's gun, which slides across the floor in the attack that leads to her family being murdered and her being left for dead. And as she reaches for that gun, the bad guy, Jefferson Coltrane, stops her by stomping down hard and shattering her arm, which remains somewhat lame for the rest of her life. There is a scene in Vengeance Turns Volume 1 where she is trying to learn to use a bow and arrow and having a very difficult time, calling her arm useless. So she builds her own weapon, the claw, a block of wood strapped to her hand 3 giant coffin nails wedged between her fingers. Her arms half broke, but all she has to do is swing it. Get it going the right direction, and something or someone's getting torn up, maybe killed. In Vengeance Turns Volume 1, we see Mia use it a few times, and on one occasion, she loses control, repeatedly stabbing a man that she mistakenly believes to be Jefferson Coltrane due to her broken memories and her rage. All of that with our character Mia and the Vengeance Turn story and the mythos because of one life-changing injury to Amanda. And this really points a lot to exactly why I wanted a co-writer on Vengeance Turns and why I felt a female would add the realistic subtext to the violence suffered and delivered throughout the film. When I was introducing Amanda to the basic story that I'd written before we got started on the screenplay, it was much more Marvel movie style of a story. In my original draft, following her injury, Rebecca becomes Mia while with the Lost People and is not just healed, but she's trained in the use of basically every weapon on Earth and to brawl with her fists like a UFC fighter or something. If I was wanting to ground the story and really focus on that female perspective of the experience of intense violence in both directions, Amanda wanted to do away with pretty much all of that right off the bat.
I think the one character trait that I possessed that I kind of went into it was the dedication to the hard training. That's just, you do hard things sometimes, and even though inside your head you're like, this sucks, this is really hard, I don't think I can do it. I have this syndrome where I believe that no matter what, I can do it. That's kind of delusional. But it gets me through a lot of hardships, and that's kind of the same idea that I had with Mia when she starts going through training. It's hard.
She didn't want to turn down Mia's ferocity or bloodthirst at all, and actually wanted to amplify it through the frustration the character would feel being smaller than the men she wants to get revenge on and kill. And even worse, that she is so lame that she cannot shoot a gun or a bow and arrow in any way that guarantees the bloody results that she is craving. That really opened the character and the story up for us. And if you've seen Vengeance Turns Volume 1, then you remember the scene where she doesn't just kill Bronson. She brutalizes this man who she catches terrorizing a family while she and Simon are on their way home from the Lost People camp. She shoots Bronson, she swings her claw and rips his eye out, and then throws it back at him, admonishing that it ain't nice to stare, and bounces it off the man's chest as he's writhing on the ground in pain. And then when he tries to crawl away to escape her, Mia leaps onto his back and drives the claw into his spine, crippling him, and then begins wailing on him after he can no longer crawl away, basically torturing him to death. That claw is Amanda's truth and mine. Her real pain, my obsession with subversion, all rolled together. When you watch Vengeance Turns Volume 1, you'll see it. It's raw, it's ugly, but it's real. Amanda made sure this wasn't some clean revenge flick. She didn't want Mia to be super skilled at every weapon. She wanted her to be smaller, weaker, always fighting uphill, and more dangerous because of that. Everything about who Rebecca and later Mia is, who she becomes, everything about the story in Vengeance Turns, while nowhere near the lives that Amanda and I live, none of it would have been possible without she and I being who we are, who we were, and digging in and finding out how our own lives and our experiences could bring these characters and this wild story to life. We wrote about what we knew. We wrote who we were. And vengeance turned. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Lethal Voice podcast. More than ever, I hope you'll share your own thoughts and questions in the comments wherever you're hearing this. Anytime I talk about process in writing or filmmaking, anything creative like that, I promise that I will always be very ready to keep an eye on the comments and keep the conversation going. So tell me all about your process or ask whatever you want about mine. Don't forget, you can watch both Vengeance Turns Volume 1 and Vengeance Turns Volume 2 on Tubi for free right now. And if you want to dig in, get more BTS, comics, and more Vengeance Turns and all of my projects, visit procrastagram.com. You've got time. Come, procrastinate and move on in. If this is your first time hearing the Lethal Voice podcast, go back and check out the first 3 episodes now and episode 0 as well. Keep your voice loud, keep it weird, and keep it lethal. Until next time, this is Robert Christopher Smith saying thanks for listening to the Lethal Voice podcast. See you next week.